Hi, good evening. I'm Ginger Garvey, and I am the Senior Partner with Freedom Financial Partners. We are putting together a tutorial series for individual income tax returns. This is Lesson 1, Class 1, Lesson 3. We're going to be discussing the filing status. So I hope that you are able to gain some useful and helpful information. Again, if you have any questions, as with the other tutorials, please feel free to leave a message on our website or to contact us through YouTube, and we would be happy to try to get those answers for you. Good luck, and I hope you learned something. Okay. Again, this is Class 1, the basics, and this is lesson number 3, filing status. I'm going to change that. This is lesson 3, filing statuses. So this is part of the basic personal income tax video series. And in this particular section, we're going to be discussing just Class 1 covers the basics, and this is lesson 3. We're going to be covering the 5 filing statuses: single, married filing jointly, married filing separately, head of household, qualifying widower with dependent child. We're also going to talk about same-sex married couples. The first thing is that filing status is very important. The filing status is used to determine your filing requirements, whether you need to file or not, what tax rate you will be taxed at, what your standard deduction would be, as well as what tax form to use, and if certain deductions and credits will apply. So the filing status is a key piece of the tax return. There are 5 filing statuses, and they are single, married filing jointly, married filing separately. Oftentimes people say, I'm married, but I want to file single. Actually, you're married filing separately. You're not filing single. The head of household and qualifying widower with dependent child. The filing status section is at the top of the page 1040, and you can see here that there is a place under head of household to list the qualifying person if they are not part of your tax return. Let's talk about the single filing status. To use single as your filing status, only one of the following must be true on the last day of the tax year. If you were never married or you were unmarried on the last day of the tax year. If you're divorced or legally separated under a separate maintenance decree on the last day of the tax year, you can file as single. If you are widowed before the first day of the tax year and you'd not remarried during the tax year, you would file as single. If you were widowed during the tax year, you would use the married filing jointly filing status, as we will discuss. If you do not qualify for another filing status, so if you look at the other filing statuses and you fail to qualify for any of the others, the default filing status is single. Married filing jointly. In order to file married filing jointly, you must be married, and that is, you must be married on the last day of the tax year. If your spouse died during the tax year and you did not remarry during the tax year, you can still file as married filing jointly. If you are in a common law marriage, then you would be considered to be married filing jointly. And you would use the married filing jointly filing status for both individuals. In order to use that, both individuals do not need to have income. So married filing jointly is simply a husband and wife who as a couple are choosing to file a tax return. Myrtle Wilson died on December 21st, 2014. Her wife, Marcy, did not work. They had filed married filing jointly in previous years. They had no dependents, and Marcy has not remarried. May Marcy file a joint return for 2014? Yes or no? Yes, Marcy may file a married filing joint return in the year that Myrtle died. To use married filing separately as your filing status, any of the following may be true. You want to be responsible for your own taxes, and you and your spouse do not agree on married filing jointly. If you are filing married filing separately, the way the tax return is completed is to complete the spouse's information, first name, last name of the filing taxpayer are put on the first line. So the primary taxpayer will be the one who's filing this particular married filing separate return. The other spouse would be on the top line of their own return. So on this return, you would have the spouse's first and last name and the social security number of the filing spouse would be the information that's in red. The spouse that is not going to be on the return, all you would do is put their social security number in where the green arrow is. So you would not put the first and last name of the spouse if you are filing separately. That information is required for the return. It's just not placed on this portion of the return. Head of household. To use head of household as your filing status, you must, first bullet point says, be married or considered unmarried as of the last day of the tax year. Have paid more than half the cost of keeping up a home for the entire tax year. In most cases, have a qualifying person who lived with you in the home for more than half of the year. Keeping up the cost of a home would include all of the expenses associated with living in that household. It would be rent or a mortgage interest, mortgage payments, real estate taxes, home insurance, any repairs, utilities, food that's eaten in the home, anything that goes into the actual upkeep and living of the people in the home. For head of household, you need to have a qualifying person. If you are in your own household and you are supporting yourself, you are not considered head of household. So even though you are providing all of the support in your house, you don't have a qualifying person. A qualifying person can be an unmarried child. It can be a married child. It can be a relative who's your dependent. It can be a parent who is, even if that parent is not living with you, if you are providing their support. So here's the chart from the IRS Publication 17. It's Table 2.1, and it goes into the details of who can be the qualifying person for you to file for head of household. So this is saying if the qualifying person is one of your children and they're single, they can be a qualifying person whether or not you can claim the exemption. If it is a qualifying child and they're married and you can claim the exemption, they would qualify as a qualifying person. If you cannot claim the exemption, they would not qualify as a qualifying person. A qualifying relative who is your father or mother, you can claim, if you can claim them as an exemption. If they are in fact your dependent, then you would be able to use them as a qualifying relative for head of household purposes. If you have a qualifying relative that's other than your mother or father, such as a grandparent or a brother or sister, then if they've lived with you for more than half of the year, or they're related to you in one of the ways listed under relatives that don't have to live with you, then you can claim an exemption for them, they would be a qualifying person. So someone who is not a mother or a father or a child, it really comes down to whether or not you can claim their exemption. And if you can use them as a qualifying person for head of household status. So we're going to go through a couple of examples here. Susie lives with Mark, but they are not married. Mark fully supports Susie and her daughter, Mary. Can Mark be head of household? First, let's look and see, does Mark have a dependent? Yes, he has two dependents. Susie and Mary can both be Mark's dependent. Would he be allowed to have head of household? And the answer here is no. And the reason being, neither Susie nor her daughter are related to him in a way that would allow for and be qualified as a qualifying dependent for head of household. Next question. Bill's son Sam lives with him. He is 19 and not a full-time student. Sam earns $4,200 working part-time. Can Bill be head of household? And the answer here would be he does not have a dependent. Sam is over 19 and made over $3,950. So Sam would not be able to be claimed by his father. And so therefore, unless there's another qualifying child, Bill would not be able to use head of household. Next example. Granny Smith allows her daughter Red and her great-granddaughter Golden to live with her. Red works and is not a dependent of Granny. Granny pays for all of the household expenses. Can Granny be head of household? The answer here would be yes. And that's if Red agrees to allow her to claim Golden. Red may not be the head of household because she does not provide more than half of the support. So Red cannot use the head of household filing status, Granny would have the option to. Dick and Jane have 2 children together and they share all of the expenses. Can they each claim 1 child and be head of household if they equally support the household? And the first thing you look at is there a dependent being claimed here? Yes, each parent is claiming one of the children, but no, only one person can be head of household. So they would have to choose which one of them provided the most of the support for the household. Doris's husband died 5 years ago, and their son David attends boarding school and does not live with Doris. Can Doris claim head of household? And this is yes, she would be able to claim David as a dependent because his schooling is considered a temporary absence. And so then yes, Doris would be able to claim head of household. Had Doris's husband died in the last 2 years, depending on David's age, she may be able to claim qualifying widower. Larry, Mo, and Curly support their father, Joe, equally. They each take turns using the exemption for Joseph and claim him as a dependent. Mo and Curly are married, so Larry wants to claim Joseph for the purposes of head of household every year. Can he do that? And does he have a dependent? Sometimes every 3rd year he would have a dependent. And can he claim head of household? No, because he does not pay more than half of Joseph's household support. Considered unmarried for head of household. In the event that a person is still legally married, they can be considered unmarried and still use head of household if the following are true. They're going to file a separate return. They paid more than half the cost of keeping up the home for the tax year. The spouse did not live in the home at any time during the last 6 months of the tax year. Your home was the main home of your child for more than half the year, and you must be able to take the exemption for the child. Doesn't mean that you necessarily do, it just means that you're qualified to take the exemption. So let's look at an example here. Jason and Joan have been separated since January 31st, 2014. Josie, their daughter, lives with them. She lives with Joan, who supplies over half the cost of keeping up the home. Joan is legally still married to Jason, but may be treated as considered unmarried and may be eligible to file as head of household. If Jason did not move out of the house until August 8th, would she be able to file head of household? And the answer there is no. If he did not move out until the last 6 months had started, he would not be able to be, Joan would not be able to use head of household because he had lived in the family home within the last 6 months of the year. And that's the requirement that's stated from the IRS. And the final filing status is qualifying widower with dependent child. This particular filing status allows a individual whose spouse has died when they have not remarried to claim qualifying widower for 2 years. The first year, the year in which the spouse died, would be married filing jointly. The second year would be qualifying widower. The third year would be qualifying widower. And the fourth year, assuming that the person is still qualified based on the age of the dependent, you would go to a head of household filing status. So the things that are necessary in order to be the qualifying widower filing status is you could have filed a joint return for the tax year that your spouse died. Your spouse died within the last 2 years, or 2012 or 2013, and you did not remarry before the end of 2014. Remember, this is based off 2014 tax law, even though we're getting ready to prepare 2015 taxes. Also, you have a child or a stepchild who is your dependent. And much like head of household, you paid over half the cost of keeping up the home that is the main home for the dependent for the entire year. So let's look at a couple more examples here. John Brown died in 2013. He is survived by his wife, Liz, and son, Andrew. Liz is not remarried and keeps up a home for Andrew. For 2015, Sue filed as married filing jointly. Is her filing status for 2014 head of household? No. She would use the qualifying widower filing status as there are more advantages to her than head of household. If you have this is dealing with same-sex married couples. If you have a same-sex spouse whom you legally married in the state that recognized same-sex marriage, you and your spouse generally must use the married filing jointly or married filing separately filing status, even if you and your spouse now live in a state that does not recognize same-sex marriages. So this was something that was a little bit unique in last year's tax season, because there is not a choice, just as if you have a marriage that is a man and a wife, a man and a woman. In that marriage, you only have the option of married filing jointly or married filing separately. There isn't a, no, I don't want it to really count. Yes, I do want it to really count. It counts if you're legally married. So here are the filing statuses in summary again. Single, you need to be unmarried as of December 31st, legally separated or under a separate maintenance decree, and you cannot use another filing status. So if none of the other filing statuses meet your current description, then the default would be single. Married filing jointly, you would need to be married as of December 31st, include both incomes on the same tax return, both must sign, and both would be responsible for the payment of the tax. If you choose to use married filing separately, you would again be married as of December 31st. You would each report your own income, and you would provide the name and the social security number of your spouse. If one of the spouse itemizes, the other spouse must as well. And we'll talk about this a little bit more in the standard deduction chapter. To be qualifying widower, you must have a dependent child. If you are a widow or a widower who does not have any children living in the household with you, you would simply move to a single status the year after you use the married filing jointly. You also have to have paid over half of the household expenses, not remarried, and you would use the status for 2 years after the death of your spouse. Head of household. Head of household has two varieties. In the first variety, you are single and you paid more than half of the household income expenses, and you maintained a home for more than 6 months for a qualifying child. So regular head of household, you are single, you are not married, you would have provided all of the upkeep or more than 50% for a qualifying person for at least 6 months in the year. Now, if you are not married, the requirements for head of household are a little bit different. I mean, if you are married, in that case, you have to have lived apart from your spouse for at least the last 6 months of the year. So you would need to have lived apart from the spouse for at least the last 6 months of the year. In addition, you would want to have paid more than half of the household costs for the dependent child who lives with you. And in that instance, it's only they live with you for more than 6 months. So those are the two head of household filing summaries. This particular course was based on Chapter 2 of Publication 17, having to do with filing status. If you'd like more information, I encourage you to refer to Publication 17 and the IRS website. If you are interested in learning more about me and Freedom Financial Partners, you may use the link on the PowerPoint that's being showed here. I hope that this was a valuable class and that you all enjoyed the presentation. And if there's any questions, please feel free to just leave an email message and we will get back to you. Thank you so much.